That was another one they said, you'll never get it done. Between civil service and unions, we love them both, but between civil service and unions, they said, you'll never get it done, you'll never get it approved. And by the way, we had virtually no help, very little. But so far, the Democrats haven't given us any votes, and that's because they will do anything they can to not help the Trump agenda, even though they know it's wrong. And Brett Kavanaugh, highest education, best grades, best tests, best everything. They thought 15 years ago he was going to be a Supreme Court judge. Look at Justice Gorsuch. How good is he? How good is he? So we're getting them through, but it's not easy because they really are. You know, their term that they use is resist. It's actually resist and obstruct. Whatever they can do to resist and obstruct. And frankly, they're lousy politicians. They have horrible policy. The one thing they're good at, they stick together. And they obstruct. And it's unfortunate. You know, we have almost 400 people trying to get into government, many of whom have left their jobs, and the Democrats are holding them up with maximum delay. They're holding them up, not allowing these great people to serve their country. It's a disgrace. That's Chuck Schumer, and it's a disgrace. It's a disgrace. But we'll get that Supreme Court judge, and that's the big one. That's the big one. Really important for those who love our military. We have
Good evening and welcome to Chuck Carlson tonight. Right now, as you.
And our Vice President, Mike Pence, is going to Hawaii to bring back the remains and to greet the families of our great heroes who gave their lives in Korea. Our fallen warriors are finally coming home to lay at rest in American soil. I also withdrew the United States from the horrible one-sided $150 billion was paid. $1.8 billion in cash. The Iran nuclear deal, it's a horror show. I hope it works out well with Iran. They're having a lot of difficulty right now. I hope it works out well. And I have a feeling they'll be talking to us pretty soon. And maybe not, and that's okay too. In December, I recognized Israel's true capital, Jerusalem. And in about 5 months, we opened already the American embassy in Jerusalem. And people had that scheduled for anywhere from 5 to 10 years, and you all know the story. We took an existing building. We played around with it. We renovated it. We fixed it up. We used Jerusalem stone, one of the finest stones actually in the world, Jerusalem stone. So instead of spending $1 billion, and the papers were right in front of me, sir, would you please prove this? What is it? This is for the embassy in Israel. American, sir. I said, how much? $1 billion, sir. $1 billion. I immediately called our great ambassador to Israel, David Friedman. Very successful man, great lawyer, one of the most successful lawyers in the country before he decided to do what he's doing. I said, David, they want us to pay $1 billion for the embassy. I don't want to pay $1 billion. I said, study it. Do you have any buildings that we own? We own so much, we don't even know what the hell we own. Find some building in a great location. Called me back 2 days later. He said, Mr. President, sir, we own the best site in Jerusalem. It's big, it's beautiful, and it's got a building on it. I can take that building and renovate it. I can do it for $140,000. I will. I said, David, how good is the site? We could never buy a better site. They were willing to spend tens of millions for a site. They wanted to buy a site which was so bad, it was totally inferior to what we already had. Don't forget, we get there first, right? You know, we have good sites. And I said, David, do me a favor. Don't make it $140,000. Sounds too cheap. Make it like $400,000. That's okay too, David. So we saved almost $1 billion. I could tell you these stories all day long. Airplane purchases. I could tell you all day long. And we started working, and for $400,000, we actually have a very beautiful American embassy in Jerusalem. Really beautiful. Now, that's one I guarantee no other president's doing. Can you imagine crooked Hillary doing that? Can you, honestly? Can you imagine? In all fairness to her, could you imagine anybody else doing that? Nobody else. Nobody else is going to do that. And I could tell you stories about what we've saved with purchases of military equipment. General Mattis would be glad to tell you, but he can't believe it. And some of the generals have said they've never seen anything like it in the world. They've never seen. Because I want that $700 billion properly spent. If we can buy twice the number of aircraft or have a lot of money left over, that's what we want. Instead of apologizing for America, we're standing up for America. We're standing up for the heroes who protect America. And yes, we are proudly standing up for our great national anthem. With every promise we keep, every record we break, every factory we open, we are restoring American strength and American pride. But to continue this incredible momentum, this incredible movement, and that's what we have. We have a movement. This may be, in fact, it probably is, the greatest movement in the history of our country. Even they will say that. Even they will say that. But to keep it going, we need to elect more Republicans. We need more votes. And we need to elect Ron DeSantis as your governor. Got to do it. And I'm telling you, I know him well. He's a great, great guy. He's going to be an incredible governor. I have no doubt. I have no doubt. I don't do these endorsements easily. I don't need to be here, but I happen to love this state, so it's one of those things. But I don't do them easily. Although it seems to have an impact. The other day, we endorsed a great gentleman from Georgia. He was probably 5 points down. He won the election by 40 points. He got 70% of the vote to 30. Think of that. Great guy. And many others. I mean, we could go over one after another after another. They're actually starting to give us credit for this. I don't think there's ever been anything like it. That's why I had to be here to formally, you know, I've been endorsing Ron. I've been saying great things, but I wanted to be here to formally endorse Ron, you got to get out and vote. Thank you, Mrs. DeSantis. Thank you. Thank you. Beautiful family. Get your friends, get your colleagues, get your neighbors, and get out and vote in November. You got to do it because, remember, we're going to win this primary, but don't take any chances. Nice lead. Nice lead. Don't take any chances. And then give yourself 10, 15 minutes of happiness, and then go back to work for November. Because we have to remember, they're putting up, I know some of the candidates, these are people that don't care about stopping crime. These are people that don't care about people pouring into our country when they shouldn't be here. They don't care about stopping drugs from poisoning our youth and pouring over the border. They don't care. Your future governor cares, and your current governor cares. Rick Scott. Loyal citizens like you, incredible people from the great state of Florida, help build this country. And together we are taking back our country. We are returning power to where it belongs, the American people. This state was settled by pioneers and visionaries who explored the marshes and raised up cities right on the sea. This state was built by red-blooded American patriots who opened the first naval air station at Pensacola and launched the first brave American soaring into the heavens. We stand on the shoulders of generations of proud Americans who knew how to work, knew how to fight, and knew how to win. And you know, when you elect Ron DeSantis as your governor, because you see it already, we're winning so much, some people are getting a little tired of winning, right? Well, by then, it'll be another year and 2 years and 3 years. And you'll be insisting, Governor DeSantis, please see our president. It's too much winning. We can't stand it. The people of Florida, we can't stand it because under previous administrations, we never won. We got used to never winning. And he's going to come to me in Washington, in the Oval Office, the beautiful Oval Office. And he's going to say, Mr. President, the people of Florida are just downright tired of winning. They can't stand it. It's just too much, Mr. President. The economy is too good. The jobs are too strong. We're doing too well. Is there anything you can do? I'm going to say, Ron, I don't care what you say. We're going to keep on winning. We're going to keep on winning. We're going to win so much, and the people of Florida actually love it, don't they, huh? They love it. Remember what I said right at the beginning. We're respected again, and that man is respected and always has been. We will never give up. We will never give in. We will never, ever back down. And we will never, ever surrender. Because we are Americans, and our hearts bleed red, white, and blue. We are one people. We are one family. And we are one glorious nation under God. And together we will make America wealthy again. We will make America strong again. We will make America...
And on many different topics, from the United States military to the governor's race in the state of Florida. He weighed in the Republican primary backing Ron DeSantis pretty assertively.
That will include the wall. That will include the wall. Now, a lot of people don't know it, but we've already started the wall. We may have to do some pretty drastic things, but we're going to get it.
The border wall, of course, the centerpiece of the president's 2016 campaign, and yet Republicans in Congress the past year and a half have not been eager to provide funding for that wall or the border enforcement the president has repeatedly promised. They are apparently content to face voters in the midterms having produced a massive corporate tax cut and not a lot else. Byron York has been watching carefully. He writes for the Washington Examiner. He joins us tonight. So, Byron, there does seem to be this huge disconnect between what the president says he wants and what the Congress is willing to provide. Why is that?
Well, there's no doubt. I think some of it's kind of simple. I think the Speaker of the House, who is leaving Congress at the end of this year, simply doesn't want to do it. And the Majority Leader of the House, who supports it, the Majority Leader of the Senate, doesn't seem to care all that much one way or the other. The other problem, of course, is the president who did make this the showcase promise of his 2016 campaign has not pushed as hard with as much focus as he could have to get this through Congress.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I think, it took the president a while to figure out how to work with Congress. And how many times did we hear last year? We heard someone say, well, we can get the wall next year. We'll get it next year. Well, now, next year is here, and it's almost August, and it hasn't happened yet. You heard the president at his speech tonight saying he got $1.6 billion. That's not going to do it. We're talking about $25 billion in real money, not promised money. And right. The president simply has not focused on this. Members of Congress need to be led. They need to be pushed. They need to be cajoled, in some cases bribed, for a president to get what he wants. And I think it's taken a while for the president to master that art.
Interesting. So, I mean, what do Republicans think is going to happen if they plan to ride the president's popularity to victory to the extent that they can in the midterms? But if they're not making good on the promises that got the president elected, how do they believe that's going to work for them?
Go back to 2006. There was a bill passed called the Secure Fence Act of 2006. It mandated a triple-layer fence along about 700 miles of the U.S. border. If it had been built, it would have really helped stop illegal crossings of the U.S. border. It was passed with big bipartisan majorities in the House and Senate, 283 votes in the House, 80 votes in the Senate. Among those voting aye in the Senate were Senator Schumer, Senator Obama, Senator Clinton, Senator Biden, the two California senators, Boxer and Feinstein. They all voted for it. There was a bipartisan consensus to vote for it, and there was a bipartisan consensus not to build the fence. It wasn't built in the Bush administration. It was not built in the Obama administration. And so you've seen in the political culture of Washington the need to placate voters by promising to do something about this, but the determination to never actually do it.
Yeah. Well, at some point, voters will rebel against that. They figure out that the football is being pulled out from under them. Byron York, great to see you. Thank you.
Thank you, Tucker.
Well, for more than a month now, supporters of illegal immigration in the state of Oregon have decided to halt the enforcement of immigration law by harassing the people who are tasked with enforcing it. Activists engaged in an Occupy ICE protest at one of the agency's facilities in Oregon. They finally left, but they left a gigantic pile of garbage to remember them by. Here it is.
Where protesters once stood, trash now litters the property next to the ICE building on McAdam. Protesters left this behind. Work trucks packed to the brim with everything from food to furniture, cardboard signs, and wooden pallets. A TriMet official told Fox 12 workers even found needles on the ground.
Cameron Whitten attended and slept overnight at the Occupy ICE camp in Portland. He joins us tonight. Cameron, thanks a lot for coming on.
Tucker, it's good to see you again.
So, it's nice to see you. So, is this a foretaste of what we can expect if the revolution actually happens? So, you guys take over and leave piles of garbage. Why would this reassure anybody watching at home that activists like yourself should have any power over anything?
Thank you for that question. So first, what I want to do is celebrate this successful display of grassroots, people-powered change. What happened here was Occupy ICE, both here in Portland and across the country, sent a powerful message about the economic and humanitarian crisis that has been created by family separation and other harmful immigration policies. We garnered the support of four former First Ladies, and we were able to successfully push the U.S. president to change a part of a draconian immigration policy. And there's more work that needs to be done to demand change.
Slow down, Cameron. I know you're excited about this. Hold on. Why couldn't you use that people power you're telling me about to pick up the garbage before you left? How does that work? You mobilize, you've got a mass movement, right, of engaged people who want to make America better, but you leave beer bottles and hypodermic needles behind. Is that really the kind of change most people want? I don't think so. No,
Tucker,
it's a serious question. Like, why didn't you clean up when you left?
Because can we talk about what's important right now about the interests of American people?
Heap.
So, Tucker, honestly, I feel like what you're doing is you're avoiding the conversation.
I'm not avoiding.
Why are we here?
Avoiding the conversation. No show addresses this topic more often and more directly than this one does. But I'm an American. I was born here. I have a family. I don't want to live in a place that looks like Tegucigalpa. And I don't think anyone does, including immigrants. And I'm just saying, if you are setting a model for the rest of us, why the hell were you living like animals? That's a totally real question. What's the answer? And then we'll move on once you answer it. How's that?
So we are living in a time of crisis in the United States, and I am so thankful that there are people who are demanding change. And you know what? What we're dealing with right now is a crisis, and we cannot sit here and cast blame for certain individual actions. You cannot take certain individual actions and then dismiss why we are here. Stop distracting from the message. The message that we are focusing on right now is the question of whether immigration's got some...
you want to read. Okay.
But so Tucker, since I thought you were a smart person, but let me talk to you in your terms.
This is central to the point.
So let me talk to you in your terms.
You're telling me you're making America better, but you make it worse.
Let's say you have an annual family barbecue, and your brother-in-law shows up drunk. Do you cancel the whole barbecue? No. So what we're talking about right now is that there was a protest where people weren't just camping outside. People across the country, four former First Ladies, they were not camping in the streets. What we're talking about is the message of this movement and holding immigration customs enforcement and Trump's harmful immigration policies accountable.
Look,
I'm not going to agree with what everybody did. I'm not agree with what everybody did, and I'm sure that you don't agree with every conservative and their actions, what they say.
But what I do focus on
is the message of why we are here, and we cannot ignore the fact that Trump's policies are not beyond reproach. That we have to demand change, and we have to do drastic things, as Trump said. We have to do drastic things to have justice.
I can't handle it. Okay. Thanks, Cameron. I don't think you did yourself or your cause any help at all. But maybe you did. Maybe there's someone watching and think, you know, that Cameron guy, the guy who left all the beer bottles and the hypodermic needles, I like him. I'm on his side now. Maybe there's someone like that. Call me if you exist. Well, a basic principle of Anglo-American civilization is that everybody is treated equally before the law, no matter who you are, no matter what your political views are. Now, the left is willing to jettison that ancient principle to protect people who shouldn't be here in the first place. During the month-long occupation of ICE, the mayor of Portland, Ted Wheeler, announced he supported the protesters and refused to have the police intervene against them. Here's what he said.
I stand with those who are opposed to the forced separation of children from their parents. I've consistently stated that I do not want the Portland Police Bureau engaged in securing federal property that houses a federal agency with its own federal police force.
So here's the nub of it. Here's the detail that makes you worried that maybe we're moving towards some kind of civil conflict. Maybe things really are coming apart. The police in Portland, Oregon, which is a big modern city, refused to even answer the 911 calls from the occupied building. That means this local police refused to protect American citizens because they didn't agree with their politics. Now the National ICE Council has sent a cease and desist letter demanding that their right to protection, which is afforded to all Americans, be preserved. Brandon Judd is president of the National Border Patrol Council, and he joins us tonight. So, Brandon, I guess I just want to make sure I've got the facts on this right, because it seems like one of those seminal moments where all of a sudden you realize everything is really different. are you claiming, is ICE saying, your agency saying, that the city of Portland refused to protect you despite your request for protection because they didn't agree with your politics?
They did, and unfortunately for the citizens of Portland, what they have to understand is now if they disagree with this mayor's position, there's a good chance that this mayor is not going to allow their police officers to support them if they feel like they're in danger from attacks or their physical person is in danger. And that is the wrong message to send. But Tucker, let's be clear, that's actually going to play in the favor of the conservatives, because this is the kind of crazy talk that rallies the conservatives to the cause, that says we have got to stop this. And the vast majority of Americans believe...
Wait a second. Where's this? Wait, hold on. Where's the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department? They're denying equal protection under the law selectively to people whose politics they disagree with. I mean, that is a constitutional violation if there ever was one. Why aren't they being arrested? I'm serious. I mean, where is the Civil Rights Division on that?
So right now, it's my understanding that it is currently under investigation with this mayor's actions. Their failure to respond to the 9/11 calls, it's my understanding that they're under investigation. But you also have to look at what the mayor said. The mayor said that that there is a federal law enforcement agency. Is the mayor concluding that the federal law enforcement agency has the right to enforce all of the laws, including the laws of the city? There's supposed to be a separate those laws that were being infringed upon. It wasn't the responsibility of ICE to enforce those laws. It was the mayor's responsibility, and he failed to do. Look,
the bottom line is, when an American citizen calls a law enforcement agency for help because he feels he's in danger, that agency has a moral and legal responsibility to come to his aid. And they didn't because they don't agree with you. And that's the beginning of the end if we allow that kind of... They should... I mean, that's totally outrageous. And just for the third time, to be totally clear, that's what happened.
That's today's politics. And that's what we have to get beyond. And that's, again... Right. It makes me happy when things like this happen, because Americans, the vast majority of Americans, disagree with these types of policies, and then we can get people that care elected.
It's unbelievable. Brandon, thank you very much for that. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Tucker.
Paul Manafort didn't kill anybody. He didn't deal drugs. He's not even accused of colluding with Russia. He is rotting in solitary confinement like a serial killer and facing 300 years in prison. Why is that? We'll tell you next. Jurors were selected today for Paul Manafort's criminal trial in the Eastern District of Virginia. Manafort is in deep trouble, and though he has not been convicted of anything, he's already being punished severely. A large group of FBI agents, all of them armed, stormed into his home earlier this year, apparently surprising his wife in the shower, terrifying his family. They could have made a simple call to his lawyer, but they didn't. Manafort then had his bail revoked, in an unusual penalty, that is, for a 68-year-old man with no criminal convictions. He has been held in solitary confinement pretty much ever since for 23 hours a day. For the crimes he's accused of in the state of Virginia, Manafort now faces 305 years in prison. That's several life sentences. So what exactly is Paul Manafort accused of doing? If you guessed murder, guess again. Most murderers don't get treated like that by the government. The average violent felon in this country receives just 6.5 years behind bars. No, Paul Manafort is accused of something far worse than murder: tax evasion and violating banking regulations. The government isn't even suggesting that Manafort stole money from a bank. They're saying he was dishonest on loan applications. For that, solitary confinement and 305 years in prison. Well, if you're confused, maybe this will clear up the story for you. The prosecutor leading the case against Paul Manafort is named Andrew Weissman. He's an enthusiastic Democratic partisan. He was a guest at Hillary Clinton's election night party in New York. Now he's trying to send Donald Trump's campaign manager to prison for life on a tax charge. For perspective on that, the average sentence for tax fraud in this country is 1 year and 3 months. It can be much longer, though, if you have the wrong politics, apparently. Alan Dershowitz is a retired Harvard Law School professor, the author of The Case Against Impeaching Trump. He joins us tonight. Professor, I'm going to make the obvious disclaimer. I don't know Paul Manafort. I'm certainly not going to vouch for his ethics. But looking at this pretty carefully, this is a case about tax evasion and bank fraud. And he's getting a sentence, or he's threatened with a sentence, that is so disproportionate compared to the average that it makes you wonder, like, what is going on here?
Well, it's very simple. His crime is being associated with Donald Trump. And don't listen to me on this. Listen to Judge Ellis, the judge who's presiding over the case. The judge ruled and said they're not interested in Manafort. Mueller is not interested in Manafort. They're just trying to get him convicted so they can squeeze him. And if you squeeze a witness, not only does the witness sing, but sometimes, according to the judge, the witness composes. That is, he becomes creative. He makes up information. He elaborates, because they know the better the story, the better the deal. So this trial today is not about Manafort. If Manafort hadn't been associated with the Trump campaign, he'd be out in New York or wherever doing his business. It's an attempt to convict him of whatever they can possibly find against him, no matter how unrelated it is to the Mueller probe, in order to squeeze him and get him to sing and maybe even compose.
Well, how is that different from what the mafia does? Do what I want or I'll take your life away. That's not justice as I thought it was practiced in this country at all.
Well, unfortunately, it is the way justice has been practiced against the mafia and against terrorists, and we civil libertarians have long been opposed to this way of dealing with problems. But the civil libertarians are quiet today. Why? Because the object is Donald Trump. Do you hear the ACLU complaining about this? Do you hear the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers complaining about this? Do you hear other Democrat civil libertarians complaining about this? No. We've always complained about this tactic when it's used against other people. But now you have some zealots standing in front of the courthouse with signs saying, lock him up, lock him up. You know, I was objecting when they had signs saying, lock her up, relating to Hillary Clinton, because I'd be making the same argument if Hillary Clinton had been elected president. And it was the Republicans who were trying to squeeze somebody to go after her. And civil libertarians all over the country ought to be concerned about this. But instead, like everybody else, they're taking sides. If this hurts Trump, it's good. If it helps Trump, it's no good. The Republicans take the opposite point of view. It's not good. It's not good for justice. It's not good for civil liberties.
Well, especially when an actual human being, a 68-year-old man, is facing life in prison for not filling out the bank forms correctly. It's pretty unbelievable. Professor, thank you for your perspective on that.
Thank you.
Heroin is killing Americans by the tens of thousands, and yet at the very moment when our drug crisis is flaming completely out of control, Congress has decided to reduce the penalties for heroin smuggling, huge quantities of heroin smuggling. Why are they doing that? Our special series, Drugged, continues after the break. America is in the grip of the single worst drug crisis in its history by far. Every year, overdoses kill more Americans than died during the entire 11 years of the Vietnam War. Opioids, particularly fentanyl and heroin, are the main culprit. So what's the priority in Congress? Well, a bipartisan group of senators led by Chuck Grassley and Dick Durbin is trying to reduce criminal sentencing for drug smugglers. The Sentencing Reform and Corrections Act of 2017 would cut the mandatory minimum for example, for smuggling a kilogram of heroin across the border from 10 years to 5. Whitney Bone is a criminal defense attorney, and she joins us now. Whitney, thank you for coming on. I think most people 3 years ago, when they first heard about sentencing reform, had in mind low-level drug equivalent lethal doses of heroin. So why would you reduce the penalty for that?
The reason we reduce the penalty is not because we're going to reduce the penalty for every single drug trafficker, or as you've pointed out, drug smugglers who are bringing drugs across the border. What we're talking about here is due process. We're talking about constitutional rights of defendants to be sentenced in a way that's not a one-size-fits-all. And the bottom line is these judges that are serving on the United States Sentencing Commission and that are advising the Senate Committee on the Judiciary have compiled a lot of information that shows, you know what, there's no nexus between this draconian minimum mandatory sentencing, which is one-size-fits-all, and every single drug trafficking defendant. Not every drug trafficking defendant is someone smuggling heroin across the border. A lot of times people are charged with possession with intent to distribute or conspiracy with possession with intent to distribute, and they are essentially low-level dealers.
I understand that. I understand that. But the threshold for this reform in this bill is a kilo, 2.2 pounds of heroin. Once again, that's over 30,000 lethal doses of heroin. That's a huge
That's
amount.
right, Tucker, but it makes it discretionary. It makes it discretionary for federal judges. What it does is it takes a 10-year minimum mandatory and gives a judge discretion to do a 5-year minimum mandatory. We already have safety valves. We already have substantial assistance provisions which allow judges to go around minimum mandatories altogether in these drug trafficking cases.
Okay, so
however,
how about this?
What they've done is they've given judges more discretion.
Okay, no, I understand, but you're not really answering my question, so why don't I pose it this way? Why don't you paint for me a scenario where someone caught with a kilo of heroin should get less than 10 years in prison?
Well, I can paint you a really great scenario which happens every day in federal court, which is that individuals are charged with conspiracy, with possession with intent to distribute, which means that every person that's involved in this broader conspiracy, from the guy who took the phone call to tell the other guy to drive to the Wendy's to pick up the heroin from another guy, all of those guys are in the conspiracy. And every time a drug deal happens, those individuals are charged with the aggregate amounts of all of those drugs, and that's not necessarily representative of one guy's involvement who's probably an addict anyways.
Okay, you are answering
scenario.
right past my question. No, I'm saying the person who is in possession of a kilo, not the person who laundered his money, not the person who did his dry cleaning, but the person in possession of the kilo. 30,000 doses of heroin at a time when 50,000 Americans died of drug ODs last year. Is there not a statement that we can send when we say, you're caught with that, I'm sorry, you're actually in trouble, for real?
Well, actually, Tucker, a person who's just in possession of the heroin would not be falling under these sentencing reform provisions, because we're talking about trafficking and we're talking about distribution and manufacturing and possession with intent to distribute. Someone who just possesses the drugs is not even really facing a minimum mandatory necessarily under the same provisions that we're talking about here anyways. But
actually
someone
what you're
who
saying
possesses the
hold on,
drugs
stop. I
is
must
not a
stop you because
one-size-fits-all.
you're being inaccurate. If you are in possession of a kilo of heroin, by definition, you are going to be charged with trafficking, period. You can't use 30,000 doses of heroin. You're selling it. So what you said is not true. But that person shouldn't get the same treatment as somebody
who is carrying 10 kilograms over a period of 5 years, where maybe it's split up in less than a kilogram a deal. So that one person who has the 1 kilogram, the one time, isn't supposed to have the same treatment. Because conspiracy.
So a lethal dose of heroin.
These are how federal prosecutors are charging these crimes, are conspiracy. And the reason they do that, Tucker, as you know, and as Jeff Sessions knows, is because they're trolling. You go after the little fish, because where the little fish are, you get to the bigger fish. And if you're interested in fixing the problem, this is the way we do it. We don't just throw minimum mandatories at people and not give federal judges the ability to make discretionary decisions regarding sentencing, so that people's
why do
due
you
process
think we
rights are
had
respected.
mandatory minimums in the first place? Because federal judges will let these people go, and I'm sure with your help.
They still have ways around them now. You can come to federal court with me, Tucker. I promise you, for all of us. Have a good night.
I bet it is.